Hello and welcome back, my friends. You know, one of the most important factors when getting a backyard food forest garden established is the mulch. Now, unless you're starting off with premium soil from the gate, which many folks are not going to be starting off with, premium soil, then you're going to have to build that soil. And one of the best ways to do that is to bring in large amounts of mulch. Now, that can be tree mulch, grass clippings, straw. Woodchips is one of the most popular, especially with food forest style design. And I wanted to share with you how things have kind of changed over the years. We're now in year 9 of this backyard food forest project, and I'm not bringing in any wood chips this year. I want to share with you why that is. So the very first thing I did when getting my backyard food forest established was I dug a bunch of holes around the perimeter of the yard here so that I could plug in some bare root fruit trees, since those are the first plants generally most folks are going to be plugging in for the start of the growing season, because you get them when they're dormant. You get them in the ground before springtime, before things heat up and they start to bud out and start to flower. But soon following that, what I did is I laid down sheet mulch, mostly cardboard, followed by about 8 to 12 inches of wood chips. And I got to tell you, laying that sheet mulch, bringing in the wood chips, that just accelerated the progress of this project so quickly. And it did many, many things for me. One thing that it did was to smother out all the grass and the vicious weeds that were growing all around here. We had bindweed and Bermuda grass, chickweed. There was lots of different plants that were coming up that were just covering the soil that I really didn't want in the garden. They're just too invasive. They suck out the nutrients in the water. So it was really important that I smothered those out rather than spend a lot of time trying to dig or hand remove. That would take years. But by laying down a sheet mulch, bringing in a heavy set of wood chips, that literally took care of the problem first year. Yeah, we had a little bit of weeds popping up here and there, and some of the weeds like bindweed, which I mentioned in the past, it's really hard to get rid of that even with a sheet mulch. But over time, as it would poke through, what would happen is it would be making its way through some of that soft humus-like soil that was developing from the wood chips, and at that point it was a lot easier to pull out than if I was just trying to take it out of that native soil. So instantly I was conditioning the land. I was also smothering out those weeds, defining pathways. But now here in year 9, I've decided to not bring in any wood chips this year, and the reason for that is balance. So you don't need to constantly be replenishing and bringing in large dump trucks of wood chips every single year. It may be a couple years before I actually bring in some more, because at this point, as we take a look around, let me pan the camera around for you. There is so much organic material growing everywhere that we've got leaves dropping. We've got chop and drop plants like the artichoke and comfrey. We got other native weeds that pop up like this mallow here. We got borage plant volunteering itself all over the place. We got perennial greens growing. I use a lot of these plants as my mulching plants now. There's even an opportunity by taking some of the prunings on the tree, or if you have larger ornamental trees, shade trees in your yard, where you can actually wood chip that on site as well. Now, one of the main benefits to this is that I'm reaching my goal of creating a closed loop system. What that means is that I'm not relying on any outside resources in order to keep my food forest not just surviving, but thriving. And as you can see, I'm having amazing results. This apium tree here is really a shining example of that. Here in the beginning part of March, we're not even in spring yet, and the fruit set is so heavy and amazing. So I have not fertilized this tree this year. I have not watered it. Well, I take that back. I did put a little bit of water on there one day, because we've only had rain actually one time in the past 6 weeks, and it was a very light drizzle. It barely made it past the first inch of soil. So with that being said, why am I having this sort of a fruit set under these conditions? Well, because if we look down towards the ground, you can still see a lot of wood chips that have yet to break down. And besides that, plants like the artichoke here are not only great for chop and drop, but as a living mulch. You can see how all these leaves fan out, and what it's doing is creating a shade space right here around the base of the fruit tree so that the sunlight doesn't hit directly on the soil surface and dry it out super quick. Another thing I love about growing the artichoke plants as part of a food forest design is that it works really well to help protect the trunk of your tree, which are susceptible to sun-scald, sunburn, like you see over here. Now, this is a reason why folks recommend painting the trunk of their tree. I've got to do my best to try to heal this tree up. I'll be covering that in some future episodes. Most of the trees still looking quite healthy. But if I would have established artichoke plants like this as an understory to my fruit trees earlier, that could have been completely avoided. Now this tree is basically right in the center of my garden, and it's getting full sun facing the south. So that's the reason why it's the one tree out of all of them that received that sort of a scald. So when performing chop and drop in my garden, there are two tools that I wouldn't want to be without. The first one being this hori, also known as a dig tool. It's a very strong steel. It holds up to digging deep into the soil, chopping plants down. It's got a serrated edge here that's really sharp. And the second tool is a sickle, a rice sickle or Japanese sickle. If I had to choose between one or the other, I'd definitely stick with the hori, but this definitely has its applications as well, and is great for hooking around plants, especially grassy-like plants like lemongrass. It does a great job with that. But this is versatile and will cover just about all your needs. But I'm going to show you now an example of how I go about quickly doing the chop and drop using the artichoke here, just how quick and easy it is and the effect that we get. All right, so what I'm considering here is, one, I've got a hibiscus plant that's perennialized and comes back year after year in this spot. So I want to open up this area and allow sunlight to come in. Also, I want to allow these leaves to stay up here so they can help to protect the trunks of the trees. But these leaves down here that are hitting the ground, becoming fodder for some of the pill bugs and centipedes and what have you, I'm going to take these out and use these as my chop and drop mulch. So with the artichoke, you just go around the base and give it a tug. Swing it to the left and to the right, and it snaps off pretty easy. You can do any cleanup you need to with the hori, but I'm going to go around. There's several more leaves around the base of this plant. I'm just going to remove these. Only takes but a second. You know, a lot of people are familiar with using plants like the comfrey for chop and drop, and that's a wonderful plant because it has a deep taproot. It pulls up and mines some of the minerals and nutrients that are deeper down in the soil, and when you chop those leaves and put it on the surface, it then releases a lot of those nutrients towards the top of the soil, which is then going to drain into the root zone. And both the comfrey and the artichoke are both cut and come again plants. So I can keep cutting from this plant. It's going to keep surviving. I can literally take all the leaves off this plant, maybe just leave one shoot in the middle, or not even any shoots in the middle, and it's going to flush back out with growth at least once or twice in the season. You're going to get an enormous amount of free mulch, okay? Now there's a lot of water in here too. Now that's a great benefit. I could literally squeeze water out of here. So what do you think is going to happen if I put this plant around the base of my other plants? Not only is it going to protect the soil from the sun exposure, but this moisture is also going to keep things nice and cool and moist below, create a bit of a microclimate even. So this plant's looking pretty good. I'm just going to remove this branch here. Just covering up the hibiscus. And now you can see I've got it all conformed and fitting in here perfectly. So yet another benefit to using artichokes this way is that you can really mold and shape them to fit your landscape just how you need it. So now I'm going to move along and I'm going to do the two plants on either side. The hori allows me to kind of reach back in there and chop it off too. Just makes quick work of this. So there you have it. In just a minute, I've literally harvested a pile of these leaves, cleaned up the area, shaped these plants to fit in really nicely. And now I can either just, let's put the tool down for a minute. I can just break these up. And then lay this around maybe the base of some fruit trees or any other plants that I want to protect from the sun. What I like to do is crisscross and kind of break it down so that water has a chance to sift through. If we do get a rain or if I do some watering, I don't want it to just shed off the leaves. And if you want a finer chop, you can go around with the hori-hori. There you go. Now the artichokes really thrive here in zone 9B, but they're quite cold hardy as well. They can also be grown as an annual. All of my plants that I'm growing back here survive temperatures all the way down to the low 20s. Anything cooler than that, you may need to replant, but the great thing about it is if you don't actually harvest the globes and you allow it to go to flower, you should get seeds by the end of the season, and you can collect your seeds and replant for the following year. Here's an example where we used a sickle to harvest some of the older lemongrass. We like to prune that back to a few inches above the ground each year and use that as mulch around the base of this young fruit tree here. Now even plants like the borage, which volunteer themselves all over the garden and are a great food source for the bees, can be used as a chop and drop. This plant here is kind of crowding my aronia berry stand over here, so I'm going to just bring this down. And let me just show you this. You see how dry the soil is here? We're still in the winter. I mean, just see how it's cracking and it's clay. Well, we want to cover this up with some mulch, help protect it. And again, just slice through this with the hori-hori, break it up a little bit, and now we reduce the overcrowding of the aronia. Chop that green leaf down, and now we've reduced the crowding on this aronia and created some nice mulch right here at the base. So there are many areas in my garden that may appear to be overcrowded, but really what it is just jungle growth that I then come in and chop and drop some of this stuff. See, we've got a young green plant sprouting up here. I'll leave that guy. And here we've got some Swiss chard volunteering itself. So I'm careful not to just indiscriminately chop everything, but I go around and strategically just take down what doesn't need to be there. Some of the older leaves on this perennial green here. Old pepper plant. And you can see here now how I've opened up the area. Sun can now get in and hit that Swiss chard. We've created some mulch on the ground. So over time, bringing in products like wood chips can be of great benefit to gardeners and food forest gardeners alike. But what I find is over the years, you can start to strike a better balance and utilize the organic material that's growing right on site to create your mulch, mainly through chop and drop and living mulches that are growing on the soil surface. And really, by taking a break from bringing in the wood chips, I'm also saving myself a lot of time, and I'm striking a better balance in this ecosystem back here. You see, when you start bringing in, importing a lot of foreign material, it has its own set of circumstances that come along with that. Usually the benefits outweigh any of the negatives, but one being is generally I'll get an influx of pill bugs which come in with a wood chip load, because really what they're doing is helping to break down that organic material into humus, but they also eat some of the leaves of your plants and small sprouts if you're trying to establish plants from seed. That could be an issue. Also, it can bring in things like fungus gnats, which, like those moist little pits of wood chips, they lay their eggs in there, and you may find you have a lot of fungus gnats, which also can destroy roots of smaller plants. Now, none of those issues have really been that big of a problem for me, and I know how to get rid of them if I need to, just using sticky traps or products like Sluggo Plus, which is organic, and you can directly put that on your soil around maybe a little patch of your garden where you're establishing some new young transplants or seedlings, or if you have an area of the garden that's just got an influx of these type of pests, that'll take care of it pretty quick. But it's not very ideal. And over time, what I found is that by closing the loop and using the organic matter that's being developed right here on site, I'm having less of those issues. I haven't seen any fungus gnats and very few pill bugs this year, and I attribute that to the fact that I've laid off the wood chips for now. Also, there's always the possibility when bringing in outside products that you could be importing something you really don't want, some sort of fungus or even some sort of contamination situation. So you got to be careful. I'm a big fan of when bringing in some of these outside products, getting to know the supplier so that you know that there's some sort of a trust there. And the best way to do that, I find, is to just be direct as to what you're using the wood chips for. And if you can, try to create a situation where you're giving something back to the person. You're already helping out these landscape companies by accepting the wood chips a lot of times because they don't have to bring it to a green waste facility and pay to have it dumped. But with that being said, it's nice to also be able to offer them something, whether it's a little monetary tip or some produce from your garden, some eggs from your chickens, what have you, and create that rapport. That way, you're definitely going to have better service and probably end up with a better product. So there's a little tip for you there. Anyway, my friends, that's going to wrap it up for now. We've got a beautiful day for gardening. We got overcast skies, perfect for planting, getting a lot of work done, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to quickly get this video uploaded for you guys and hopefully inspire you to get out in the garden and get at least one thing done today. And so with that, thank you all for watching. Have yourself a great rest of the day. Until next time, this is Dan from plantabundance.com. Take care. I'll be talking to you again soon. Another benefit to artichokes: they make a great shelter for chickens. See her hiding under there, safe as can be, getting some shade.